There is a strange thing about procrastination. We call it laziness. But sometimes, the person who procrastinates is not lazy at all. They may be ambitious, intelligent, full of plans. They may spend hours imagining the person they want to become. They may even know exactly what they should be doing. And yet, they don't do it. The assignment remains unfinished. The email remains unanswered. The book remains unopened. The application remains in the drafts. And somehow, the day disappears. Then comes the familiar sentence. I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes Monday. Monday becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And eventually, something interesting happens. The task is no longer the only problem. You begin to distrust yourself. You tell yourself, why can't I just do simple things? What's wrong with me? Maybe I'm just lazy. And this is where procrastination becomes psychologically interesting. Because procrastination is often not a problem of time management. It is a problem of emotional management. We don't always avoid the task. Sometimes, we avoid the feeling attached to the task. Think about it. You don't necessarily hate writing the report. You hate the possibility that the report might be terrible. You don't necessarily hate studying. You hate the feeling of discovering that you don't understand something. You don't necessarily hate applying for a job. You hate the possibility of rejection. You don't necessarily hate going to the gym. You hate feeling weak when everyone else seems stronger. So the mind discovers an escape. Don't do it. Not yet. Watch something. Check your phone. Clean your room. Make coffee. Research the perfect method. Organize your notes. Anything, except the thing that makes you uncomfortable. And for a few minutes, it works. The anxiety disappears. You feel lighter. That relief is important. Because your brain learns from relief. It quietly records. Avoidance worked, and the next time the uncomfortable task appears, you avoid it again. This is how procrastination becomes a habit. Not because you consciously decided to become undisciplined, but because your mind discovered a very effective way to escape discomfort. The paradox of procrastination. Here's the cruel part. Procrastination makes you feel better now by making you feel worse later. You avoid studying tonight. You feel relieved. Tomorrow, the exam is closer. You feel anxious. You avoid it again. Now the anxiety is even stronger. Eventually, the deadline becomes so close that fear finally becomes greater than avoidance. And suddenly, you work for 6 hours without stopping. You think, see, I work well under pressure. Maybe you don't. Maybe pressure simply became the only emotion strong enough to overcome your avoidance. And this creates a dangerous cycle. You delay. Anxiety grows. Deadline approaches. Panic arrives. You work. The task gets finished. Relief returns. And because the task was eventually completed, your brain never learns the real lesson. It learns. Waiting until the last moment is uncomfortable, but it works. Until one day, it doesn't. Sometimes procrastination is fear in disguise. Consider the perfectionist. People often think perfectionists are extremely disciplined. But perfectionism and procrastination can live in the same room. In fact, they often become close friends. Because if something must be perfect, then beginning becomes terrifying. The first sentence must be brilliant. The first video must be amazing. The first business idea must be original. The first painting must be beautiful. The first attempt must somehow prove your potential. And when the standard becomes impossible, the safest thing is not to begin. Because if you never begin, you never have to discover that you might not be as good as you imagined. This is one of the hidden comforts of procrastination. It protects your idealized version of yourself. As long as you haven't tried, you can still believe you could have been extraordinary. But the moment you begin, reality enters. And reality is rarely as flattering as imagination. You make mistakes. You look foolish. Your first attempt is mediocre. And suddenly, you have to confront something painful. Potential means nothing without practice. The procrastinator often has a complicated relationship with the future. There is another psychological trap. The future version of you is extremely convenient. Future you will wake up early. Future you will exercise. Future you will read. Future you will study. Future you will be confident. Future you will finally become disciplined. Future you is almost perfect. And because future you doesn't exist yet, you can ask them to do anything. I'll start tomorrow. What you're really saying is, Tomorrow's version of me will deal with today's discomfort. But tomorrow arrives, and you are still you. Same fears, same habits, same phone, same room, same mind. We keep imagining that time will transform us. But time doesn't transform character. Repeated choices do. Why your phone is so powerful. Now consider the modern environment. Your brain evolved in a world where rewards were relatively scarce. Today, rewards are everywhere. A notification, a message, a video, a joke, a new photograph, a new piece of information, a swipe, another swipe, another. Your task may offer a reward eventually, but your phone offers one immediately. This creates a simple psychological battle. The assignment says, work for 2 hours, then feel accomplished. Your phone says, give me 10 seconds and I'll make you feel something. And the brain is very sensitive to immediate rewards. So when the difficult task produces boredom or anxiety, the phone becomes an easy escape. The problem isn't simply that you have poor discipline. You are living inside an environment designed to compete for your attention. But that doesn't mean you are powerless. It means you need to understand the battlefield. The deeper problem. Perhaps the deepest form of procrastination isn't delaying a task. It is delaying your life. We say, I'll travel when I have money. I'll create when I'm confident. I'll meet people when I feel better. I'll become myself when life becomes easier. And without noticing, life becomes a waiting room. You sit there waiting for the right conditions. But perfect conditions rarely arrive. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be responsibilities. There will always be some reason to postpone becoming the person you want to become. And eventually, you realize something uncomfortable. You weren't waiting for time. You were waiting for permission. So how do you actually change? Not by insulting yourself. Not by calling yourself lazy. And not by watching another 20 motivational videos. You begin by becoming curious about your avoidance. The next time you procrastinate, don't immediately ask, why am I so lazy? Ask, what am I trying not to feel? Is it boredom, fear, confusion, perfectionism, embarrassment, overwhelm? Maybe the task is too large. Maybe the next step isn't clear. Maybe you're afraid of failing. Maybe you're afraid of succeeding. The answer matters. Because you cannot solve a problem you keep misunderstanding. Make the beginning smaller. One of the most powerful things you can do is reduce the psychological size of the task. Don't tell yourself, I have to write the entire essay. Tell yourself, I'll write the first sentence. Don't say, I need to study for 5 hours. Say, I'll study for 10 minutes. Don't say, I need to completely change my life. Ask, what is one action I can take today? The goal is not to become a completely different person overnight. The goal is to teach your brain something new. Starting is survivable. Once you begin, resistance often becomes smaller. The mountain was partly created by imagination. And perhaps this is the most important part. You need to stop waiting to feel motivated. Motivation is unreliable. It comes. It goes. Sometimes it arrives after you begin. Not before. Think about a fire. You don't always get a large flame immediately. You begin with a spark, then another piece of wood, then another. Eventually, there is enough heat to sustain itself. Action can work the same way. You don't always need motivation to begin. Sometimes you need to begin to create motivation. The psychology of becoming. There is something beautiful about this. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you change your relationship with yourself. You begin to think, when I say I'll do something, I actually do it. That belief is powerful, because confidence is not simply thinking highly of yourself. Sometimes confidence is trusting yourself, and self-trust is built quietly. One completed task, one difficult conversation, one morning when you got up anyway, one page, one application, one uncomfortable beginning. Nobody sees these moments, but you do. And eventually, they become evidence. Evidence that you can rely on yourself. The final thought. Maybe procrastination isn't a story about lazy people. Maybe it's a story about human beings trying to escape discomfort. And that makes it far more understandable. But understanding yourself is not the same as excusing yourself. You can have compassion for your patterns and still change them. You can understand why you avoid something and still choose to face it. Because at some point, you have to stop negotiating with the person you could become. You have to meet the person you are today, not the future version, not the perfect version, not the motivated version. You, right now, with your unfinished work, your uncertainty, your fear, your imperfect beginning. And perhaps the question isn't, how do I stop procrastinating? Perhaps the better question is, what am I waiting to feel before I allow myself to begin? Because there may never be a morning when fear completely disappears. There may never be a day when you suddenly become perfectly disciplined. There may never be a moment when you finally feel ready. And that's okay. You don't need to feel ready. You need to become willing. Willing to be uncomfortable. Willing to be imperfect. Willing to begin badly. Because a life can be postponed very easily. One day at a time. One excuse at a time. One tomorrow at a time. And then one day, you look back and realize that you spent years waiting to become the person you could have started becoming today. So start small. Start badly. Start afraid. But start. Because the opposite of procrastination isn't productivity. It is presence. The willingness to meet this moment and actually live it.